Welcome to Ignatian Migration Dialogue. I'm Bridget Cusick, VP for Marketing, Communication, and Outreach at Jesuit Refugee Service, USA. Ignatian Migration Dialogue is JRS USA's webinar series featuring JRS leaders and guest experts discussing pressing challenges related to work with migrants and refugees. Today's focus is religious liberty, how fear of enforcement keeps people from practicing their faith, and how extreme enforcement and policies also affect the freedom of religious leaders and church members to support their fellow parishioners and other migrant families. Excuse me, in future weeks and months, we will cover topics including state and local immigration measures, statelessness, migrant deaths, and public safety. And in each case, we will dialogue with an eminent thinker, legislator, scholar, advocate, or other important voice. Before I introduce our host, a quick plug for Giving Tuesday. 1 second here. I'm going to give you a very convenient way of donating to JRS. You can scan the QR code that we are showing right now. This year, we're raising funds for mothers and children in need of nutritional assistance in our programs in Uganda. Your gift today will help save lives. Now, I have the privilege of introducing JRS USA President Kelly Ryan, who will host today's discussion. Kelly joined JRS USA in May of 24. Prior to that, she spent 30 years working in refugee and asylum law, migration management, and human rights law and policy. She's a two-time presidential appointee who has worked extensively with faith-based organizations, including the International Catholic Migration Commission, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and the Holy See. Kelly spent 7 years as the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the State Department Bureau for Population, Refugees, and Migration, and 3 years as the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Immigration and Border Security at Homeland Security. After about 25 minutes of conversation, we'll take Q&A for 15 to 20 minutes or until we run out of questions. So please use the Q&A button on your Zoom interface if you would like to submit a question. Kelly, over to you to introduce today's distinguished panelists.
Thank you so much, Bridget, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today for our third Ignatian Migration Dialogue. We're very delighted for today's discussion. We have Dr. Brett Hoover, who is a professor of practical theology at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, and Miguel Naranjo, who is the director of the Religious Immigration Services section of CLINIC, the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. Brett and Miguel, thank you so much for joining us here today on Giving Tuesday. I'm going to start with a few introductory questions just to get us all acclimated. Brett, you're a professor of practical theology at LMU and a creator of the original Busted Halo website and the ministry back in the early 2000s. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you became interested in immigration personally and professionally? And I'm a big fan of your book. I ordered it online, Immigration and Faith, Cultural, Biblical, and Theological Narratives, which was published in 2021.
Hey, thanks, and it's good to be with you here. And let me just say that I'm such a big fan of the work of JRS, and thank you for all that you do for people around the world. Yeah, I kind of came into this from the perspective of ministry. Even before I was a professor in academia, I worked in ministry, and I worked and both in my work in ministry and then later in my research, I was studying multicultural Catholic parishes. And studying multicultural Catholic parishes always requires a kind of primer in immigration. And I learned mostly in the field by talking to people, listening to people, but then I had to study up to kind of figure out what was going on around me. So that's kind of how I got into it. So it's really, for me, it's not just something interesting that I study, but a labor of love. And I'm always thinking of the people that I've met along the way that have made an impression on my heart and made me laugh and made me cry. And that's been a big part of how I got into this work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the stories that people have and what you can learn from them in the ministry, but then and applying it professionally, it's such a gift to be able to have that intersection of your interests, your personal and professional interests. So thank you for that. Miguel, you're an immigration attorney and you lead the religious immigration services at CLINIC. I know you've been practicing since 2002. What drew you to the work, and what have you seen? What are some of the changes you've seen in the work that you've been doing over the years? Could you talk a little bit about your work and also your work at CLINIC and what they do?
Sure. So first, yeah, I've been practicing over 20 years. I've actually been with Clinic coming on 19 years. So prior to joining Clinic, I did work in private practice, mainly doing employment-based immigration, but also some family-based immigration. I think one of the reasons I've stuck around Clinic so long is certainly the pleasure and the honor I've had to work with religious workers from all over the world. One of the things we joke around in our team is, we never have had so many people pray for us because we're constantly getting, we're going to keep you in our prayers, both from the religious organizations that we serve and, of course, the individual religious workers that we serve. So that's always a nice perk to the work that we do. Yeah, certainly in my 19 plus years in working with religious workers and religious organizations, certainly seen a lot of things. There have been changes to the religious worker immigration program. And certainly this year in particular, it's been quite unprecedented, the number and the speed at which we're seeing changes in immigration policy. It's really quite a bit, quite stressful. And unfortunately, it is just the start of things to come. We'll see how things play out in the following years, but definitely it's been a big challenge. And one of the things for the religious worker program, it is employment-based immigration, and normally various administrations have treated employment-based immigration with some favor. Certainly wanted to international workers benefit the U.S. economy, and certainly the religious worker program receives that benefit as well. But of late, all immigration is under increased scrutiny. And for religious workers, certainly in the last couple of years, and in particular this year, it's been difficult. It's been challenging. And one of the biggest concerns of what we have is the chilling effect this has on U.S. Religious organizations. And because if they think that the process is too complicated or too difficult, right, that's going to discourage, unfortunately. And I have heard from organizations that, yes, the process is just too hard. We can't get our religious workers, or we can't get men and women in formation here to the United States. And they're considering other options. They're considering sending them to other parts of the world. So yeah, this year definitely has been one of the most challenging, but we'll see how things play out. So.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. I mean, I guess one thing I would say for the people listening in who aren't really familiar with religious worker visas and employment-based visas generally, I mean, the benefit is to the American people. The people who come are serving in communities. So when those visas aren't issued, or when there are delays, or when there's a designation about priorities, it's really hurting American families. It's not just the worker himself or herself who's being disadvantaged. So I think you're right. It's so unprecedented. For those who don't know, I'd love for you to just talk very briefly about Clinic, because it's such an important organization. I can tell you that I led efforts to reform asylum domestically in the United States when I was at the Department of Justice, and Clinic was a very valued partner for the government. So could you talk a little bit about Clinic and how it serves and where it serves in the United States?
Sure, absolutely. So we were founded by the USCCB, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, over 35 years ago. And the original idea behind Clinic was to create a support system, a national organization that could support immigration, community-based immigration programs across the country. And the main way we would do that is by providing immigration law trainings to community-based immigration programs and other type of support that someone, say in a Catholic Charities office or some other office, if they wanted to create an immigration program, how do we do that? What do we need? And one of the biggest programs that we support is a program that allows non-lawyers to receive recognition and accreditation. It's called RNA. And so there's a shortage. There's not enough immigration attorneys to serve the immigrant community, and so this program is a huge benefit for community-based immigration programs to staff individuals who will then support immigrants either with immigration paperwork or represent them in immigration court. So that's one of the main functions of our organization, is to support organizations through this RNA program to build the capacity of these accredited reps. We currently have a network of over 400 plus community-based immigration programs across the country. So the vision that the bishops had for us 35 years ago is coming to pass. And then, and so another parts of clinic I do want to mention is we have a group of immigration attorneys that are involved in advocacy. And so what clinic engages in is what's called administrative advocacy. So we are not, per our tax exempt status, permitted to do legislative advocacy. So we don't go up to the Hill and advocate on legal change, law changes. However, what we do is we try to engage with the federal agencies, the ones dealing with immigration, like the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, to help troubleshoot issues that would benefit our network. So if there's a problem with a particular case, why is it being delayed, or if there's any other problems, historically what we've done is we've been able to have a partnership with the federal government to troubleshoot issues and to work for the benefit of our network and for the benefit of immigrants. This year has been one of the most challenging because there is no, right now, I can say that there is no direct line of communication, and we are not at the table with the federal agencies. And then finally, I'd give my group a plug, right? So in addition to advocacy and training and technical support, then there's the religious immigration worker program. That's the one that I lead. So we're a group of immigration attorneys and paralegals, and we are also a national practice. So we currently represent about 180 so organizations, religious organizations across the U.S., mainly religious orders, but Catholic dioceses and archdioceses. And of course, we represent religious workers from all over the world. So it's it's one of the great things about this job is just having the opportunity to work with different organizations across the country, and of course, workers from all over the world. So it's definitely, and you get to learn so much about them, and of course, know that their work, their ministry, definitely has a tremendous impact on this country, and of course, communities here in the U.S. So.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I want to turn back to you, Brett, and talk a little bit. You referenced your work on multicultural parishes. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of the American Catholic Church is the demographics, or the range of nationalities we have, the numbers of people foreign-born versus native-born. And I just would love to hear your thoughts on what you've learned from some of your studies, and really what the changes are. I mean, obviously, the church is always changing. It's always evolving based on, the time in history. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you've seen about changing demographics or patterns that you've seen on multicultural parishes.
Absolutely, yeah, and also maybe just to weigh in on the last thing.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you for your work, Miguel, and with clinic, with particularly around the religious visa, because I used to do cultural orientation for international priests working in the U.S., and almost all of them were touched by clinic in some kind of way, and I think many people know because of their parish priest is an international priest, or what we used to call missionaries, but a lot of people don't know that in some dioceses, as much as close to half of the clergy are actually born in another country. So this is a tremendous, tremendous impact on the U.S. Church. But to answer your question, sorry, Kelly, I just couldn't resist on that.
Please.
Yeah, is that I mean, in some ways, the Catholic Church has changed because the United States has changed, right? Since in 1970, something like 4% of the population were immigrants. Because of the restrictive laws that were passed back in the 1920s. But since the reform of immigration laws in the 1960s, that is really, the foreign-born population has really changed and really ballooned, and which is, of course, leading to some of the sort of blowback that has led to where we are now. But it's particularly an issue in the Catholic Church. In part because so many immigrants are from countries that have a high profile and high demographic presence of Catholicism, especially in Latin America, Mexico in particular, and for example, the Philippines in East Asia. And so, so that's really changed our makeup by it. But demographics are always tough, especially around religion, because because the government doesn't do any religious demographics. But I think some of the larger sample surveys, like the Religious Landscape Survey and Gallup's work, do give us some idea, like both of how many Americans are Catholics, but also that probably somewhere around 29% of Catholics are immigrants. So that's almost a third. It's a good chunk. And it's and another 14% are children of immigrants. So this is really an enormous percentage of the Catholic population, which is one of the reasons why I think this issue of immigration has become so important to a lot of Catholic leaders. And in terms of, and it's also, you mentioned native born, people with status, people without status. It's again, when we're talking about people without status, it's even harder to kind of figure out what's going on. People by definition who are trying to escape notice. But it seems that like some of the data that's come out of the USCCB and other religious organizations, it seems that about 61% of the undocumented population is Catholic. So that's a majority of the undocumented population. And that's the same data suggests that about like maybe 1 out of 5 people in the United States, 1 out of 5 Catholics are either people that are in danger of being deported or family members or people in the same household as people are in danger of being deported. So this is a really big issue for the Catholic Church in terms of who we are. And how that because of the demographics of Catholicism, when I said 29% of Catholics are immigrants, keep in mind about 15% of the population. So Catholics are double the population almost.
Yeah. I think the numbers are actually very important. I mean, I was looking at some statistics related to Los Angeles and just the number of languages spoken in parishes. I think it was like 69. It's really, it's amazing. It's so rich. And it's, of course, really good for us as a country to have that range of skills and people from all different backgrounds. But the changes in immigration policy are definitely, I think, disproportionately affecting Catholics in the United States from the numbers that you've shared. Miguel, we can't have parishes and religious communities without priests, nuns, deacons, and brothers. I mean, it's absolutely kind of a non-starter as Catholics. How have we've become a missionary church where we're having to receive international priests, and how big is this problem? Is it something we can address quickly, or is this becoming kind of an emergency situation for the R1 visa issue?
Yeah, so definitely certainly vocations in this country have been on the decline for quite some time now, and the Catholic Church is growing overseas, mainly in Asia and Africa. So the organizations that we work with, I would say it's been quite a steady demand to bring in a religious here to the U.S. to serve the Catholic Church. And also for those that are interested in going through the formation process, and then you have student visas with seminarians coming to the U.S. So yeah, definitely a steady demand because there's a need. Certainly there's a need. Even though the vocations may be on the decline, certainly there's a need for the Catholic Church here in the United States and serving those immigrant communities that Brett just mentioned, right? They too need support, and so having someone from, say, their country or speak the same language is a benefit as well. Yeah, so definitely the process of trying to bring in a foreign-born religious worker used to be easier. There used to be a time when the religious worker would go to the embassy or consulate abroad with a letter in hand, a job offer, an invitation from a diocese or a religious order, and would present themselves to the embassy or consulate and say, I'm here to apply for an R1 religious worker visa. I'm coming to serve the church in the U.S. And then about, I don't know, about maybe 15, 17 years ago, in the immigration, Kelly, I'm sure you know, or from your perspective, there's always concern of fraud in immigration. And so one of the changes that occurred in the religious worker program some time ago was this concern over fraud. And essentially what that ended up in the program having more requirements, more paperwork to be filed, more review and more scrutiny. And so the process, basically, an organization has to file some paperwork with the Department of Homeland Security, get that approved first. And part of that process also may include what they call a site visit from the Immigration Service. So this is a visit not from ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. It's actually a fraud investigator. So that was part of the process to make sure that the sponsor is bona fide and that the religious worker is bona fide. So the first step is getting the paperwork approved here in the U.S. And then the second step is then the religious worker going to the embassy or consulate abroad and then applying for the visa. Now, the paperwork that's filed here in the U.S. does not guarantee the issuance of a visa, so there's still another review there. But if everything works out for the religious worker, they will obtain an R1 visa that will allow them to initially enter the United States for 2.5 years. And then if their sponsor, their employer, their order, their diocese wants them to stay longer, then they can extend their status for an additional 2.5 years. So typically a religious worker will stay for at least the Catholic one, will stay for the 5-year period. And then usually during that period, if they want to stay longer, apply for permanent residency, there's a process there. But bottom line is, so what has been the challenges of late? Well, the challenges of late is certainly more enhanced scrutiny on these petitions and visa applications. Certainly you've heard in the news about student visas receiving additional review over social media presence. That's one thing we're warning clients about. What is your social media? And this is something that the Department of State has always asked about, but now there's more enhanced review of that. The other big obstacle of late that has happened for the religious worker visa is a religious worker could go to the embassy or consulate and get a visa valid for this 2.5-year period. And the trend that we've noticed this past summer is that the religious workers from some African countries, their visas are now being cut short. So now they're only valid for 9. So if you're a religious worker from, let's say, Nigeria, you're only going to get a religious worker visa valid for 90 days, and you only get to use it one time. So this trend is mainly to, one, make immigration to the country more difficult, and then also restrict it in any way possible, either by shortening the visas. And of course, again, you're dealing with the various agencies here and the scrutiny there, and they can maybe dealing with ICE. So yeah, definitely some roadblocks. And then sort of the bigger problem that has gotten the attention of the USCCB is there's this backlog in the permanent residence program. So that's a huge problem that religious organizations are dealing with right now. And that's also an impediment to religious workers remaining in the U.S. And so it's created a situation where religious workers are having to leave the U.S. So basically causing major disruptions to their ministry, to their work here in the United States, because they're not able to complete certain processes here in the U.S. Yeah, so definitely in the last couple of years, and in particular this year, there have been some major challenges for religious workers.
Yeah, that's a huge problem for priests and nuns from Nigeria, where there are huge numbers of vocations. So, I mean, that's really kind of a shame, because that's a pool of people who would either like to be, go to school here or serve here. It would be wonderful. I was reading about the case of the 5 priests in Idaho who are serving a huge geographic area, and all of their visas are expiring next July, and without attention to it, their people will not be able to attend Mass. I think they'll have to go on, I guess they'll either have to drive hundreds of miles, or they'll have to figure out some other way to address it. It seems to be kind of a crisis here. And are there any efforts on the Hill with legislation on this to address the issue?
Yes. And I will give the USCCB a lot of credit on this. And it's interesting, when this backlog program arose about 2 years ago, and it's sort of taken this long to finally kind of get some actual legislation. So there is a bill in the House and the Senate. It's called the Religious Worker Protection Act, or the RWPA. And essentially this, while not a solution to the backlog problem, it would allow religious workers that are going through this permanent residence program, they would allow them to remain in the U.S. while they allow that permanent residence process to play out. So it is, and certainly Clinic and USCCB and other Catholic organizations and other faith-based organizations have been advocating for this. And hopefully, I mean, it's Congress is a very uncertain outcome. What's going to happen? It is a piece of immigration legislation, a favorable one. It's hard to say how that's going to play out. So that's one sort of good piece of news out there. The other, I think maybe some of you probably are familiar with, there's been some litigation from the Diocese of Paterson, New Jersey, bringing a claim against the Department of Homeland Security over this backlog issue. Of course, the latest I've heard is that there may be an agreement that they are going to move to dismiss their claim. That there could be some relief that the federal government may provide that would not require a legislative act. But again, sort of in a wait and see moment right now, just to see what happens. And it's yeah, so there is some positive things that have been happening, but until we see something in writing, then we'll know for sure. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the two Republican senators from Idaho are big supporters of the bill. So again, it shows this bipartisan support for religious workers.
It is.
So I think that is really, really helpful. And now I'd like to talk. You mentioned it, Miguel, but this past year has seen a lot of unprecedented change, and this has also contributed great fear in Catholic communities related to mass deportation. So I'm sure both of you know that on January 25th, the president signed an executive order number 14165, which says it's the policy of the United States to take all appropriate actions to secure the borders of our nation, and then removing promptly all aliens who enter or remain in violation of federal law. So under the current administration, the Department of Homeland Security's Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, issued a memo that abolished the Biden administration's directives on where immigration enforcement could generally be carried out. This is called protected areas that were not subject to immigration enforcement. And this idea of having protected areas had been observed by both Democratic and Republican administrations for about 30 years. With that, it basically, just for the audience, this meant that with limited exceptions, ICE, or previously INS, refrained from arresting persons at houses of worship, schools, healthcare clinics, social services, and community-based organizations and other public places where adults and children gather. With that memo, the administration instead gave ICE agents unfettered discretion to pursue and arrest individual immigrants in front of their children while receiving medical treatment, and in cases that I know of in Colorado, while meeting their obligation to attend Mass. Families have stayed home from the sacraments at the time that there are reports around the country of children not being able to receive First Holy Communion and reconciliation. Over the summer, Brett, you reported for Commonweal that 25 out of 80 kids in one parish didn't show up for confirmation. These are playing out all around the country. Can you give us your thoughts about what it means, this mass deportation, the concern of families about their exercise of their First Amendment rights to practice religion? Brett, maybe to you first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is an enormous problem right now, and it's an enormous problem on many levels. But just to get at what you're talking about in terms of like the confirmation parish story that happened during the immigration crackdown here in Los Angeles during the summer, I talked to a lot of pastors, and in immigrant-rich parishes, attendance is down. It's just down. And, we don't have any firm figures on things like this yet, but I trust these pastors and their estimation of what's going on. Even for people that are coming, they're taking precautions. There's odd things happening. At one parish I know here in Los Angeles, they had a really good relationship with a local synagogue, and people from the synagogue came and stood outside during Mass, so that they would be able to warn them if immigration authorities were showing up. This is so the fear that's preventing people from going to Mass, as a lot of people know, the bishops of San Bernardino and Nashville have both said, okay, if you're too afraid to go to Mass, we'll give you a dispensation. Kind of that's how widespread the knowledge and the sense of this is, and how much of an effect it's having. I mean, of course, it waxes and wanes as people see the crackdown coming or going from places. It's still happening here in Los Angeles. Um, but I think it's really changed people's if people have, and not just people who are undocumented or have temporary status that they're about to lose, but also their family members. And I mean, I have friends who are naturalized citizens who weren't born in this country, who carry their passport with them everywhere they go, who refuse to travel abroad because they're afraid of what might happen to them when they come back into the country. So now I don't, all this is to say that this fear is very real, and it is inhibiting the religious practice on multiple levels. I mean, I presume we'll talk about this later on too, but it's also inhibiting the religious practice of people that want to help immigrants. But anyway, just to get us started.
Yeah. Miguel, over to you in the clients or the clinic scene. Anything you want to add to this?
No, but I just want to just echo what Brett said, that, yeah, we're hearing this from the organizations we represent and the individual religious workers. And for, our duty to our clients, right, to these individual religious workers, certainly we've been, things that in the past we would not normally tell them, like, for example, yes, do keep, we'd always say, keep a copy of your passport, your visa, your any documents showing your legal status, because if you are now working in the immigrant community, and let's say, or you just happen to be walking down the street, right? And ICE comes upon you to make sure that you have your documents. And then, of course, the other thing we've been, in our organization and many organizations have been doing, is certainly trying to remind individuals of their rights, right? So we've had a lot of Know Your Rights materials and presentations. And so we have some targeted materials that we have presented to our clients, so they know, that they understand. We've been getting a lot of inquiries from religious organizations who serve immigrants in part of their ministry and their mission, and their concern over possibly having a harboring charge against them. So that's another concern, right? And again, if you would have asked me a year ago or 2 years ago, should that be a great concern? I would have said no. I mean, I can't recall many cases of the federal government coming after religious organizations. However, if you ask me today, yes, I would say it is a serious concern. Yes, you need to be careful about that and be prepared. And again, I'm discouraged because of the chilling effect this is having, right? Because it is impacting these organizations' ministry and their mission, right? They're calling to serve immigrants, and now it's being somewhat compromised because of this fear that's being created. So,
Yeah, I
By
think
the way,
yes, please.
so no, by the way, also, for example, at Catholic universities, where I'm hearing faculty talking about, like you were just saying, Miguel, about being very careful about what they're doing and working with students that they either know or suspect might be undocumented, and the students themselves, because we can't guarantee that immigration authorities won't show up on campus. My wife works at a Catholic university as well, and they chase somebody right onto her campus.
Yeah, I think this is really astonishing, and the word is now overused, but unprecedented. I mean, I never would dream that this would have happened in my lifetime, that religious organizations would be worried about pursuing their deeply held religious belief by serving people. It's an upside down world, really, in my view. Let's talk a little bit more about that. How does it play out? I mean, we have seen challenges in Texas with Annunciation House. We've seen Catholic Charities attacks. What is the defense? What can religious organizations properly argue to defend themselves from the overreach of the federal government or the state government?
I mean, that that is the question. Well, certainly litigation, and again, there is a number of actions being pursued at the moment. to challenge the administration over there if they, if they are in fact it's an overreach on the part of the executive branch. It's certainly the district courts can rule in one way, and then there's the circuit courts that can appeal. You can appeal to the circuit, and ultimately it will be the Supreme Court, right, that will issue the final word on that. And unfortunately, right, the trend has been to defer to the executive branch and their authority. But that's not to say we shouldn't keep trying. And in fact, that's one of the things, that's one of the spaces historically our organization has not had a presence in. But now, and actually, I can tell you during the first Trump administration, we did venture into litigation, and then we got away from it. Now we're back into it, just because that's where the need is from our network. So the community groups that we work with and represent, they are also asking us, yes, we have to take matters to the next level and try to combat that. But as far as other things that organizations, certainly being informed of what their rights are, I think that even though it is, like I mentioned earlier, a little discouraging, the chilling effect, I guess I do feel hope in that the clients that we are talking to want to know what they can do, right? And so there is a willingness to, okay, we have to know our rights. Okay, make sure we ask, okay, if someone approaches us, do you have a judicial warrant, not an administrative one? How can we protect our organization? How can we protect the individuals that we serve? I think you're right. You're also hearing about certainly on the parish level, parishioners wanting to accompany members of their parish to their immigration court proceedings. That's that's building quite a bit. I've attended a couple of trainings on that myself, just to understand, and also in terms of documenting everything that's happening, right? So if you do, right, I mean, you are certainly in public spaces allowed to record, and understanding certainly not interfere with any law enforcement actions, but certainly knowing your rights to record and to document and then to report. I think this will be important. Obviously, going down the road, I do believe there will be accountability at some point on this. It's just right now, it's just very hard right now. So,
yeah, I mean, it's the First Amendment is such an important part of U.S. law, and it is such a serious part of it that any attempts to abridge it really have to be guarded against quite rigorously. And so I think it's going to bring a lot of Catholic and non-Catholic organizations together, not just the traditional ones like the Becket Fund, but others as well. So I think this isn't going to go away. It's going to be an issue for us for quite some time until it's resolved. But hopefully people of all faiths will be able to carry out their religious tradition in the way that they are supposed to be able to exercise it under the First Amendment. I want to change a little bit to talk about Archbishop Gomez and Leo and what they've been saying. Brett, maybe I could turn it over to you for your thoughts. I'm sure you've read Archbishop Gomez's op-ed in the Angeles News where he criticizes mass deportation. Of course, he also recognizes the right of states to protect their borders. Could you talk a little bit about his leadership on immigration and what your views of it are in terms of his relationship to his flock?
Yes, no, thank you. I mean, Archbishop Gomez has been, like for a long time, he's been kind of outspoken about immigration issues. And he's also an interesting figure with this because, of course, he's in the largest archdiocese in the country. And that's very immigrant rich and also very Latino. And but he's also an interesting figure because of his own background in terms of being a part of Opus Dei and having a lot of connections to a more traditional or conservative Catholic community. So I think he's a terrific advocate that way. And he has basically stayed the course in terms of his own perspective he's out there shilling for comprehensive immigration reform, saying basically our system is not working and it needs to be reformed in order for it to work. And I'm sure we could talk a lot about why that is so. But that's kind of been his message. And so when the crackdowns came, I think he's a person that is very reluctantly involved in politics of
Right.
any sort. But of course, sometimes the people have needs and the gospel has political implications. But that, when the crackdown happened here in June, his kind of, axiom over and over again was that deportation is not an immigration policy.
Right.
So he's kind of stuck to his guns that way. There are certainly people in Los Angeles that wish he would have been more outspoken or more sharp in his kind of message to the government. And he has a lot of influence over more traditional Catholics, people more likely to have supported President Trump.
Mhm.
And I think there's, as Miguel was just saying, like the support of Catholics for their own religious liberty, for their own freedom to practice their faith, and to protect the religious practice of their brothers and sisters in Christ. It seems like that's a really important tactic in terms of giving a different message here, and I think he's a great messenger for that. So I would just start by saying that I'm happy also to talk about the Pope if you'd like, but
Yes,
maybe
please, please jump
yeah,
in on the
no,
Pope.
yeah, sure. Pope Leo is, he's still a little wet behind the ears, right? As Pope, we're still hearing from and he's also seems like he's a more cautious personality than Pope Francis, right? Who never really hesitated to speak to the press or anybody else. Um, but at the same time, he's made it clear, in his initial apostolic exhortation, as well as in messages to the press here and there. First of all, that he sees immigration as a pro-life issue,
Yes.
and that if you're not defending the dignity of human beings who are migrants, and he's very concerned, specifically concerned about the kind of vehemence and even sometimes violence involved in the crackdowns here, the internal crackdowns by immigration authorities here in the United States. But more in a bigger way, he doesn't want to be talking about the United States all the time because he was born here, and he's also a Peruvian citizen. He himself is an immigrant to Peru. He spent most of his adult life there. So I think it's important to keep that in mind in the same way that we kept in mind that Pope Francis was the son of immigrants. Um, but on a kind of broader level, I think what the Pope wants to say is that this is ultimately about human dignity and about which people are vulnerable. And because of that, Catholic social teaching says that when people can't flourish, can't find their dignity at home, they have the right to migrate. So I think he's just going to keep hammering things like that. I don't think we're going to hear a lot of specific. I mean, he really, really encouraged the U.S. bishops to give their recent special message. And I think that's part of why they did it, and also why there was such consensus among the bishops, 216 of them. There were only 5 against and 3 abstentions for that message. That never happens
Yeah.
with our quite divided episcopate. So I think some of that was the, no, I wouldn't say pressure, but kind of he was basically saying, you guys should be talking about this. I'm the Pope. I'm supposed to talk to everyone in the world. And I think that had some effect.
Yeah, I think it was a tremendous statement. And what's interested me in Washington is hearing from so many people how important it was for non-Catholics to have the bishop speak. And that was a surprise to me. But again, it shows the power of the church when it speaks in unity on such an important issue. And, again, for the audience, this is not new for the bishops. They've been speaking on this for decades. I mean, one of my favorite ones, messages is the joint statement from the Mexican and U.S. bishops in 2003. I think the language in there we could be reading it today as if it was written yesterday. And sadly, things have not improved. And they call them out. They also call out the duty of a state to protect its citizens and create conditions where they flourish, the right to stay, as well as the right to leave if you cannot protect yourself or your family. You have a duty to get up and move. And then, of course, there's the duty to return, or not the duty, the ability, the right to return in safety and dignity. So I think all 3 are really very important parts of the whole for the migration experience. And Catholic social teaching gives us a wonderful way to look at it, which is very valuable, and it's getting a lot of interest from others. I will put one small plug in. we did do a Catholic social teaching seminar on the right to stay, the right to migrate, right to return. It's on our website if you're interested, but we had some great theologians, including Cardinal McElroy and Cardinal Baggio from Rome. So very proud of our work there. But Bridget, maybe I could turn it over to you now for questions.
Yes, thank you. We have a few really good questions, and I'm going to start, apologies, puppy in the background, with the following from Mary in Fort Wayne. What progress has been made in regard to these challenges through having so many Catholic bishops on the Presidential Religious Liberty Commission as members and advisors?
Brett, do you want to take that, or
I will,
Yeah.
yeah. So because there are four bishops, including two on the commission itself, the religion, and as well as two that are on the advisory group. And I mean, I think maybe the most the most positive sign from that group was the recent comments of Bishop Barron, who of course has a tremendous following via social media and other, through the Word on Fire. But his expressing particular concerns, I think, inspired by what happened in Chicago, about the unwillingness of the immigration detention centers to allow pastoral care. Which is, of course, an enormous religious liberty issue, right? Like if we can't even send chaplains in to, and I mean, there's also been some, kind of along those lines, there's been some pushback against, bishops, priests, sisters coming to immigration court. I even heard one priest getting physically pushed by an immigration agent. And so I haven't heard myself any other comments from the bishops, Cardinal Dolan, Bishop Barron, as well as I think it's Bishop Paprocki and Cordileone, Archbishop Cordileone from San Francisco. I haven't heard any other statements from them, and maybe I hope that we do.
I do as well. It's a very important commission, and it can do very valuable work, particularly overseas. But we have to make sure that our house is in order too.
This question and another are broadly similar, so I'm going to take the liberty of combining and ask any advice for religious workers seeking to serve affected migrants, whether here with documents or without, especially with things changing drastically almost every day.
Miguel, can I ask you? Oh, good.
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was
please.
just going to say, I think they're meaning from a legal perspective. Are there ways to protect yourself or what have you?
Well, I mean, certainly, if you're one concerned about your own immigration status, as I mentioned earlier, certainly making sure you have your papers in hand. As far as you can't control sort of the external events. Certainly if ICE arrives, but certainly your awareness and your affirming your rights, knowing that you certainly. This is the right, and to the individuals that you're serving, understanding that they know their rights, right? The right to remain silent, the right to legal counsel, the right to not consent to a search, things like that. You have to assert these rights. So I think that's the thing. You have to certainly know what your rights are, and then make sure that you assert them. And then, certainly in situations that could arise, if individuals are there, then able to document. Again, there still has to be an accounting for this. Again, we don't know when this could happen, that ICE could arrive, but certainly knowing, understanding, and asserting your rights, and the individuals that you're working with, that they also know and understand and assert their rights is the first step. As far as working with families, making sure they have sort of plans in place right? Okay, if the mother gets picked up, who's going to pick up the kids from school, things like that, emergency plans. Our network, right? We work with the immigrant communities, making sure, and that has been on the rise as well, right? Making sure that you have, custodial plans in place and and emergency numbers, right? They're going to take your phone. Maybe you're going to have your numbers written down, right? So if you do get into detention, so making sure that the individuals that you're serving, and again maybe yourself, that you have sort of plans in place in case you do get detained and put into detention, right? Because you want to make sure and then wanting to know the follow-up, what's going to happen. I mean, it's just been so, for lack of a better word, crazy the last several months, and ICE is really just not operating in the level that we expect them to. It sort of, adhere to policies and respect and dignity, right? That they're essentially, but you still have to do what you can on your end. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. So.
Brett, did you want to add anything?
Uh, Maybe just not so. I don't want to speak as a legal authority since I'm not one, but I do think in terms of for religious workers beyond the legal sphere. I mean, of course, I would second a lot of what Miguel said about know your rights and that kind of thing. I think it's because things change so quickly and because these crackdowns sort of come and go. I think it's really important to kind of check in. Um, that to visit with people, talk to people, create phone trees, because sometimes needs get surfaced when we do that. That really change the game. I can think of one parish in particular where they realized how many people were not going out because they were afraid of the crackdown, and so they began a food delivery service that was very similar to what was happening during the pandemic lockdown. And so I think just by checking in sometimes with what people's concerns are, what their fears are, it can help us figure out, it can help religious workers figure out how to be supportive of them.
Yeah, I can give an example too. I was recently in Denver meeting with students, and one of the students mentioned that a family whose kids were at the college, their father had been picked up by ICE and had been disappeared for 2 months, and they had no idea where he was. And they didn't have an attorney, and they didn't know about the locator. And so, I mean, there's a lot of information that needs to be shared. And so I think this idea of checking in is, with anyone, it's true accompaniment, and it would be very valuable. And of course, you might not have the right answer, but you may be able to help get the right answer. And so I think that checking in idea really could be very, very valuable. So thank you for that too. And Miguel for yours. Bridget, any more of these questions?
Yes, at least I think we should be able to tackle at least this one. This comes to us from Kat Riddle with Catholic Charities of Louisville. And she asks, what other ways can dioceses and archdioceses support detainees spiritually when we are unable to bring the Eucharist to them because we're, perhaps unlawfully being barred from access to detention centers, or at least inadvisedly being denied that kind of access? What are your thoughts on this?
This is a hard question, right? But I think one of the ways is by supporting families and checking in with them. And because sometimes you can learn, because families have at least some limited access through the phone, usually to detainees sometimes. So sometimes we can learn what we can do. I think, I mean, I think we should continue to press for access to detention centers, especially clergy and other religious workers, because this is our right. And I mean, too bad if it's inconvenient to the government. But I do think that checking with the families, I think that there may be, I don't know what else we might have the opportunity to do, but in terms of writing letters or in other ways communicating with them that people are praying for them, that people are supporting them. I also think that that public during the crackdown, we had a number of interfaith prayer services here in Los Angeles. I think those kinds of things, when detainees learn about them, especially if they're outside detention centers, I know that may be a little out of some people's comfort zone to stand there and pray the rosary very loudly or something like that. But those things can be effective if you are close enough to be able to do that, or even just when they find their way. I mean, sometimes it's surprising what finds its way into a detention center in terms of information.
Yeah.
But can I also say something else about that? I think because as Catholics, we are a divided community. I think there's also a lot that religious workers and people and just ordinary parishioners that want to help can do in terms of improving the educational environment around these issues.
Mhm.
If we let the government kind of say what they think is going on when we're not sure they're always speaking truthfully or legally, then we're basically surrendering the field. I think we need to be more outspoken about Catholic social teaching. I mean, with things like this. And I think there's a lot of ordinary Catholics can do. One of the things a couple of my colleagues and I have said, we said we'll show up for free at any parish if you want us to talk about Catholic social teaching, and also, by the way, scripture about immigration. So I think that's also something else that a lot of people can do.
Well, Brett, they're very lucky with that offer because you really are an expert on Catholic social teaching. So if you were here, I would ask you to speak at my parish. I would say that I can also add just a little bit, which is I personally have seen, we co-hosted with the Archdiocese of Washington a spiritual procession. We had hundreds of people who were able to join us, and we had a mass at St. Matthew's. I know the diocese or archdiocese in Denver just did a Eucharistic procession outside of the detention facility, and of course, our dear friend Archbishop Wensky prayed the Rosary down in Florida, which led to reopening the detention facility for pastoral visits, which are very important. So I think prayer is really important, and also making known, in a very positive way, our Catholic social teaching and our Catholic voice, giving rise to our voice. So I think those are all very, very valuable. Bridget, are we out of time, or can we do one more?
I think we can do one more, and this is a really good one because it's a little bit from a different kind of supporter. I'm a non-religious supporter of JRS, so I would like to know how to articulate how accompanying migrants and refugees is a vital part of religious work. Do you have any suggestions? And this is for any of the speakers.
Brett, this is your book.
That's interesting that a person is asking how to make a religious argument who's not religious. But yeah, I mean, again, to me, this is, I think the scriptures, like for Christians, not just Catholics, but Christians, I think the scriptures is a really good place to start, because one of the things I've been saying to people is that like the witness in the scriptures about immigration is all over the place. So it's really sometimes when people are trying to make an argument against for immigration restriction of the kind of, again, and mass deportation, they engage in some kind of strange casuistry with the scriptures about law or whatever. But I mean, the Hebrew Bible is full of immigrants, I mean, from Abraham on, who, by the way, God told to migrate. And there are, about 36 times in the Hebrew Bible that the people of Israel are told to honor the rights and respect those who are foreigners in their midst, because they were foreigners in Egypt, which is something I think is a scriptural point that is very relevant to Americans, since so many are descendants from immigrants. Don't forget where you came from when you think about these things. The prophets mention it, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus himself, his family are asylum seekers in Egypt. And the Good Samaritan, in many ways, is a parable about how our responsibility goes beyond, like, our neighborhood is bigger than just people that we know, that strangers in need are also our responsibility. So it seems like it's a really powerful message that threads through the scriptures in many ways, and that's a way we can talk about this beyond the Catholic community. Although Catholic social teaching is very well suited to talk to people who are not religious, maybe better than the scriptures, because it's rooted in the principle of human dignity. So I think some of that. I also think there's many other ethical frameworks that go beyond religion that people have been using, or from other religions. I think about my Buddhist colleagues and the way they talk about compassion. I think about, the Abrahamic religions, because they, basically the Quran is born in an experience of migration from Mecca to Medina. That's where the Islamic calendar begins, with that migration. So, so there's a kind of like a bit of a, if I may say, a bias toward migrants in all three of the Abrahamic religions, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And as well as, it comes up, I mean, almost because religious persecution, sadly, is so common in our world, both historically and presently, people migrating as a religious group is really common. And it's a bedrock, also a right of our asylum system, that one of the persecuted groups that is protected by our asylum system is religious people that are persecuted on behalf of their religion. And by the way, those are people that are being barred from our country right at this moment.
Yeah. One small point I would add for non-religious people, just looking to our Constitution and its recognition of the inalienable rights of people, that they're not given to people, but that they have them, just their human dignity is theirs, and it should be always respected. So I think even from the deist perspective of Thomas Jefferson writing that way in the Declaration, you really get the sense that human dignity is available to all of us, whether or not we're believers. And the UN itself has accepted it in its preamble, and when it created the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the UN Charter. So I think for non-Christians or non-believers, there's the accompaniment model is really respecting the human dignity, and I think that's a good way for people who are not comfortable with quoting scripture or talking about Catholic social thought. So let me. I think I'm going to have to close here, but I want to sincerely thank Brett and Miguel. I really hope we can have you come back on. I don't think we've covered everything. So in future time, I hope you'll be able to join us again. This is really important work that you both do, and we've learned a lot today. So thank you very sincerely from JRS USA for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.